And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The United States has attacked nuclear facilities in Iran. The British government has said that Iran must be prevented from having nuclear weapons and urges Iran to negotiate. Until this development, the British position was to call for de-escalation. My panel will discuss Britain's policy and what dangers the British government may be prepared to take. I'll be joined by guests from across the world today as we try to understand what might happen next in this conflict. In lighter news, there's been news about 2 shipwrecks in recent weeks. Coin evidence confirms the discovery of the Spanish galleon San Jose. And it seems that after 250 years, Captain Cook's ship HMS Endeavour has been located too. Historian Richard Jones will be here to brief us. But first, your latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey with your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The United States has joined Israel in its attacks against Iran, dropping bombs on 3 major nuclear sites. President Donald Trump praised the strikes, which in his words have obliterated key enrichment facilities. B-2 bombers carrying the bunker buster munitions, which are capable of penetrating sites deep underground, are reported to have been used. Iran confirmed the attacks on Natanz, Isfahan and Fordow, but denied it suffered a major blow. The UN Secretary-General has said he is gravely alarmed by the use of force and described the move as a direct threat to international peace and security. The British government has denied any involvement in military action, but says it was informed ahead of the strikes. In a national address, Donald Trump warned Tehran would face more devastating blows if it does not agree to peace.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has thanked Mr. Trump for what he called a bold decision to use the awesome and righteous might of the US.
History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
Iranian officials have called the attacks outrageous and warned they would have everlasting consequences. The country immediately retaliated with what is reported to be its most significant attacks on Israel since the conflict started. Explosions have been heard in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Haifa, with at least 16 people injured so far. A British man has been arrested in Cyprus accused of spying for Iran and plotting a terror attack near a key RAF base. Local media say the suspect, linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard, was caught with a long-lens camera and 3 phones watching the UK's key Middle East airbase. He was tracked to a flat near Limassol and arrested. Israel says the plot targeted Israeli citizens and was foiled by a joint operation. The UK Foreign Office says it's in contact with authorities over what some are calling a spy in plain sight. More than 1,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel illegally so far this weekend. 437 arrived on Friday, with more than 500 yesterday, and 2 more boats currently in French waters heading for the UK. Border Force and lifeboats have responded to over 9 small boats spotted off the coast. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer warns the situation is deteriorating, threatening a visa crackdown on countries refusing to take back failed asylum seekers. French police have stepped up tactics, using tear gas in some cases, but also standing by as migrants launch dinghies into the Channel. And the Prime Minister is calling for Glastonbury to remove the French hip-hop group Kneecap from its lineup after one of the band members was charged with a terror offence. Liam O'Gahany appeared in court earlier this week after allegedly displaying a flag in support of the proscribed terrorist group Hezbollah during a gig last year. The rapper is currently on bail and due to arrive in court again in August. He denies the offence. You're up to date. I'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Bethany Elsie. Let's now get the latest from Mark White. Mark?
Yes, good morning to you, Michael. There have been significant ballistic missile strikes from Iran on Israel in retaliation to clearly what happened overnight with the US strikes on their nuclear facilities. And I think for the first time, we really saw some quite significant widespread damage. As you can see from these images on high, looking down at these apartment blocks that have been absolutely obliterated by the ballistic missiles. We understand, according to the Iranians anyway, that they launched 40 ballistic missiles today, and unlike previous days, some of these ballistic missiles seem to be getting through in greater numbers now, and obviously impacting in particular these civilian areas. We're told from medical services in Israel that 16 people have been injured. However, they are still looking through the rubble for potential victims of the strikes early this morning. As far as the operations in Iran are concerned, well, the Israelis have been carrying out more strikes this morning, targeting those surface-to-surface missile launchers, also targeting other military assets such as combat jets on the ground. And they say that those operations will continue. We believe that from the Americans' point of view, for now at least, their operation against those 3 nuclear facilities at Isfahan, at Natanz and at Fordo are over for the time being. Now, the Fordo operation, according to President Trump, has been an unprecedented success, has obliterated that particular plant. We remain to see what the actual battle damage assessment is in the hours ahead, but those huge 30,000 pounds bunker busting bombs can certainly penetrate quite deeply. And it's believed that they, at the very least, have done some very significant damage to the entrance and exits of that Fordo facility, which, of course, is buried deep into the mountain there. Interestingly as well, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Authority, the UN's nuclear watchdog, has just said with regards to the strike at Isfahan, they said that the US military strikes involving cruise missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, took out a further 6 buildings on that site after 4 buildings had been taken out earlier in recent days by the Israeli Air Force. However, they say that little, if any, nuclear material was in those buildings, Michael.
Mark White, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date with the situation in Israel and in Iran. Now, the British government, impotent really, alongside the rest of Europe, has from the sidelines called for de-escalation between Iran and Israel. But President Trump was apparently paying no heed and United States forces have attacked those 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Some days ago, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, "This is the dirty work that Israel is doing for all of us. The Mullah regime has brought death and destruction to the world." Why has Britain been so much less bold and straightforward? What are the politics that has caused the British government to virtue signal its love of appeasement? How must that policy change now in the face of a new reality as our allies Israel and the United States pummel Iran? So we're going to talk to our panel about that. Madeleine Grant, Stella Sonsekidu and Andrew Barclay. Welcome to all 3 of you. Let me start then, perhaps, just with a quick reaction to what has happened. Madeleine, what has been your reaction to the United States attack on Iran?
Well, I think the way that you set this up and framed it, I completely agree with. The thing that strikes me is that, firstly, a lot of the commentary around this was completely wrong. You know, this assumption that there would be no escalation, and also the way in which Europe and its leaders, including Britain, have been completely isolated from these discussions. It was only 4 days ago that Keir Starmer was saying that nothing the president said had given any indication that this would be happening, and now it's happening. So I feel that we're completely on the sidelines, and the only players that matter here are Israel and the USA, and Israel will do what it wants to do regardless of what we say about it.
And what's your reaction to the strike itself, Madeleine? Is the world a safer place because of the strike, or less safe?
I think it's probably a safer place. I think that, of course, people of my generation grew up in the shadow of the Iraq War, where there were lies told and misinformation about the nature of the threat in Iraq. So I think that does slightly colour discussions, but I think that Iran is an order of magnitude very different to that. The Israeli, the rationale for doing so did not come out of nothing. It came out of intelligence reports, including from the International Atomic Agency. So, I think on balance it probably is, and I think Olaf Scholz is much more on the money here than Keir Starmer is.
Stella, what do you make of, first of all, the American attack on Iran?
It is a reckless escalation. There is no democratic mandate. This is exactly the opposite of what Trump has promised his voters that he was going to do. He's being manipulated by Netanyahu. He was not going to do that. The only reason why he's intervening now is because he was left with no choice after Israel's actions. And Netanyahu went into a war which he cannot complete. Israel doesn't have the capacity to finish this war. They knew that they're going to need US intervention, and this is what is happening now. I completely disagree that the intelligence is now better. The International Atomic Energy, the IAEA, said on June 17th that there is no proof that Iran is anywhere near close to having an atomic weapon. Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump's director of national security intelligence, said back in March the same exact thing, which the CIA has been saying, that Iran is very, very far away from having the capacity to have a nuclear weapon.
Your point of view is not exactly the same as mine, not exactly the same as Madeleine Grant's, but just the logic of your position. How is it you believe that Donald Trump was left with no choice by Netanyahu? You're saying that the Americans don't believe they were close to having a bomb. How on earth, then, did the Americans have no choice?
The CIA has been saying that. Donald Trump, responding to his own government, to Tulsi Gabbard, said, "I do not care what she said."
Yes, but help me. What is the logic for saying that Donald Trump had no option?
Because up until a few days he was saying that he wasn't going to do this, and he's doing this because Israel went into this. And now, the moment when it looked like it's paying off, the moment when it looked like this could be a good opportunity for Donald Trump to look like he's a victor.
That's different. That's not no option. He's decided that the politics are right.
Yes, but it's not that the politics are right. He's an extremely weak leader who's being manipulated by others. So he's literally following into the footsteps of Netanyahu. Netanyahu knows how to flatter him and how to make him look good, and he knew that this was going to be a situation where Donald Trump would have to do that. But now, in the future, Israel still needs Americans to finish this war. They cannot complete this on their own. They do not have the capacity.
Andrew, sorry to keep you waiting so long. What is your reaction to the strike in Iran?
I think America's done the world a great favour by nullifying the threat of nuclear weapons being developed by the world's greatest sponsor of state terrorism, who are intent on death and destruction across the world, including towards Britain, but it's in their own constitution to eradicate Israel. And I think that last night's strike, or this episode over the last couple of weeks, has presented a sort of golden opportunity, a generational opportunity to nullify that threat. This isn't about Iraq or boots on the ground. This is a precision strike specifically to take out that threat. And I think they've done an amazing thing in doing so.
How has it come about? I mean, obviously Donald Trump didn't intend to do this when he was elected. His electoral base may well be against doing this sort of thing, certainly if it becomes prolonged in any way. How then was it that as Israel began to attack Iran in the last 8 or 9 days, how was it that Donald Trump suddenly saw an opportunity to do this? What changed his mind?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, the developments between Israel and Iran, where Israel nullified any Iranian defence and dominated their skies over Tehran. So that presents in itself an opportunity to do certain things that may never come back if they rebuild. That's one. And I think the second thing is the fact that it's Trump doing this versus any other president who was elected on a base, a MAGA base that is incredibly isolationist, I think gives it all the more credibility. His biggest supporters are against this. So I think the intelligence that he has seen, combined with the golden generational opportunity, means that he has no choice but to take out this nuclear threat and ensure peace. You know, a lot of the time, I think the calls for de-escalation, when your opponent is developing a nuclear weapon and your opponent is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, the real de-escalation comes from taking action. The real risk is doing nothing, which is in itself escalatory.
Yeah, Stella, let me put that point to you. I mean, that is the obvious point. I mean, do you think the British government has been in a glorious position, constantly calling for de-escalation, whilst the facts of life in the Middle East are being rewritten by Israel and the United States, and we stand idly by?
I completely agree. We need to stop appeasing the Israeli government. This is the government we need to stop appeasing. And we have done a lot of that. Israel is a terrible ally to the UK. It is a terrible ally to Europe. It has led us into terrible decisions. It is leading us into a full-on war in the Middle East. And I completely agree that Iran is a horrible government. I have no sympathy whatsoever with Iran or any other theocratic government. But frankly, we need to realize that Israel is not acting in the interest of the rest of the world. They are acting, Netanyahu is acting in Netanyahu's interest. And what he's doing is he's creating a new generation of completely radicalized people.
Madeleine, why do you think the British government's position has been, as I would describe it, inglorious? Is it because of some of the people whose support it enjoys, voters, or is it because it's worried about us? Is it afraid that we're going to lose lives to terrorism, for example?
I think it's a mixture of those two things, but also there is an important element within his own party, and the Prime Minister himself is the living embodiment of this, that is kind of obsessed with international law, but sometimes to the point of, for example, this decision comes after we have given away the islands from which some of these strikes are being launched, you know, on the basis of non-binding international legal judgments. And of course, Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, has said that he thinks this would contravene international law. And there is obviously a range of views on this. There are other international lawyers who can take a completely different view, but I think that this dovishness is partly explained by that absolute devotion to sometimes controversial and spurious international legal arguments.
Andrew, where do you think British policy is going to go next? I mean, I don't happen to agree with Stella that we're going to get into a war because, not least, I think Iran has, you know, no allies and has been largely disarmed. But I will certainly admit that there's an increased risk of terror. Do you think the British government will continue to be unnerved by that possibility?
I think the British government, the most likely scenario is the British government continue as they have been, which is to be incredibly nervous, as you said, about their base. And their reaction is always, you get the sense it's always about internal party management rather than what's in Britain's interests. And so I think that's most likely what's going to continue. The other thing is, just to Maddie's point on the Chagos Islands, the bizarre situation on this is that we would have had to notify Mauritius, who is an ally of China, who is an ally of Iran, if America were going to launch attacks from the Diego Garcia airbase. So I think it's absolutely correct that the Labour government's priority is the international law, the international law types and their internal party management that is very much against doing anything that is in Britain's interests, and their reaction's always dictated by that.
Thank you very much indeed, panel. We'll have you back just after midday, when I think that the subjects are going to be similar, or whatever is developed in between. And speaking of which, there is some breaking news. An Israeli military spokesman says the United States strikes in Iran were in coordination with the Israeli military. OK, coming up, we'll get a reaction to that news this morning, and we'll also go live to Israel. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain. We like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. We remind you of the breaking news. The United States has launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure in what President Trump is calling a spectacular military success. The British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has said since, Iran can never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and the United States has taken action to alleviate that threat. Let's talk now to former Armoured Corps officer, now defence analyst, Patrick Benham-Crosswell. Patrick, welcome to GB News.
Good morning, Michael, and welcome.
So the United States has been using a piece of massive ordnance. It weighs about 13 tonnes. It's dropped from a height of about 7.5 miles by an extraordinary-looking plane, the B-2. That gives it a penetrative capacity of maybe sinking 60 metres below the ground, at which point it detonates, and 2.5 tonnes of the 13 tonnes of weight are explosive. What kind of faith do we have in that ordnance to do the job that's necessary in Iran?
I think we can be very confident that it's doing it. I think it's important to remember that if the target is an underground facility, you can either try and penetrate the facility or just blow up all the entrances. I mean, people and equipment have to go into this thing through entrances, and it may well be that rather than trying to penetrate what's rumoured to be several hundred metres of rock, these GBU-57s have been used to make a real mess of the entrances. Solves the problem.
I've read that 6 of these were dropped on one of the facilities, the one that's deep in the mountain. 6 of those 13-ton bombs. The president was very quick to talk about their total destruction. But in practice, when do we know what has happened? Do we have to have, or rather, does Israel have to have people on the ground to assess the damage that's been done?
Well, I mean, a standard part of most air operations is, as you'll know yourself, there's subsequently a follow-up or even a simultaneous follow-up with photography and imagery from everything from the dropping aircrafts to the satellites. And I'm sure they're being looked at in Israel and Washington right now.
Would you say that possibly President Trump was speaking a little prematurely? I mean, he was speaking immediately after the attacks had occurred and was talking about the total destruction. Would you think that was a bit premature to be able to make that assessment?
Possibly. I mean, I think it would be perfectly possible to say we hit all the targets that we intended to hit and appear to have destroyed them, because you can get that from near contemporaneous imagery. Of course, there's always the risk that they missed or the intelligence failed to find another vital part that they haven't yet struck. But I think it's probably reasonable to conclude that those enrichment facilities aren't going to be working for a while.
There's been speculation that Iran had moved its nuclear material out of these facilities. That would seem to be a reasonable precaution on their part. That would mean that the nuclear material was intact, even if the premises on which they could work on the nuclear material have been destroyed. And, at least one American official this morning was saying, well, we can't say that we've done this job forever. There'll be a time when they go back to that. Any kind of assessment about how long that might take?
Well, I think there's 2 strands to it. I mean, firstly, if they've still got some highly enriched uranium and they need to enrich it more, then they're into the whole process of buying and building centrifuges and facilities to operate them. I think there's also probably a more worrying possibility, and again, this is me speculating about the speculation, but if the Iranian regime is collapsing and it's lost its threat of being able to make a nuclear bomb, it can still make a dirty bomb. And I would imagine, that's, if you like, the last card that it's holding. It's not going to be particularly effective, but it will upset public opinion. And I think that's why we're seeing the Israeli Air Force and now possibly also the United States Air Force as well going after the ballistic missile production facilities, so such a dirty bomb can never be delivered.
What do you think of the disagreements that there have been about how close Iran was to making a nuclear weapon? The reason that I think this is quite an important debate is, of course, it echoes so much the debate over the war in Iraq, when the question was, did Iraq really have weapons of mass destruction? And we can see exactly the same discussion beginning now, with even people inside the American administration saying that Iran wasn't that close to having a nuclear weapon. What do you make of that debate?
I think that's a false comparator. I mean, the war in Iraq was launched on an entirely false premise. The IAEA has said Iraq has 180 odd kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, which has no other purpose. You would not spend the money and the effort to enrich uranium to that level unless you want to make a bomb. From what I've read, I'm a humble tank soldier, not a nuclear physicist, but the hard yards are in getting to 60%. enrichment. Thereafter, getting from 60% to the 90% that you need is perhaps 10% of the effort. So you could say that Iran's had got 90% of the work done. I don't think it's particularly difficult for them to have design and build a warhead that could even be one just waiting for the the nuclear components to go in the middle of it. So I think people who are making that comparison are being with the invasion of Iraq are either being very silly or dissembling for other purposes.
Yes, I mean, some of the people who've been making that point include a former British ambassador to Iran. So I mean, it's not just people on the fringes who've been talking about that. Anyway, from what we know, that these facilities have been substantially destroyed, or as you say, at the very least, they've been rendered unusable because the entrances have been crushed and so on. From what we know, how different is the political geography of the Middle East this morning?
That's a good one. I don't actually think it is. I think by taking out or delaying indefinitely Iran becoming a nuclear power, what we've actually done is maintain the status quo ante, which is Iran is a country that's implacably hostile to Israel and most of its neighbours. It has a will to use force in a way that few nations do. Albeit, I suppose, also, it's now got significantly less force than it had a couple of weeks ago. But in terms of the intent of everyone, I don't think it's changed a bit.
Yeah. I mean, the regime in Syria has changed. A very important client of Russia has come to an end. Hamas, Hezbollah have been decapitated. The Houthis have been hit again and again. Now the Iranian nuclear capability has been destroyed. Its missile and air force capabilities have been debilitated. And you say not much has changed?
Well, Israel is still facing an Iran that wants its destruction. I think brilliantly, and people underestimate this, the Israelis have destroyed the military capability of Hamas by killing all the bunkers, and the military capability of Hezbollah in the same way. So I suppose the change is that Israel is more secure than it has been for perhaps in its entire history. But it doesn't mean that Iran's gone away and it's going to pack up. I think the big call will be when have you put Iran in its box enough? I think if people get carried away with regime change and this, that, and the other, that's as Iraq did show, that's a recipe for disaster.
Okay.
Line in the sand, you shall not have nuclear weapons. We've taken that away. Now get on with your lives.
Thank you very much indeed, Patrick Benham-Crosswell. Another breaking update for you this morning. We are expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, shortly. We'll bring you that statement, and we'll also go live to Israel next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Hello there, this is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. We may now officially be into astronomical summer, but it is turning fresher for many of us as we see some heavy showers push in on a brisk breeze, all associated with this area of low pressure. Tightly spaced isobars means those winds are going to be quite blustery around today, and those weather fronts are starting to push in those showers from the west. They have the potential to be quite heavy at times with some rumbles of thunder, particularly across northern and western areas of the UK. And if you are in that breeze, you'll certainly notice the fresher, almost cooler feel to things compared to the recent heat wave. Across northern areas of Scotland, we'll be around the mid-teens in terms of our Celsius mark, more around 20 degrees across the far east where we see a touch of shelter. Again, for parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England, around the high teens here as those showers continue to push their way through. There will be some sunshine in between, but despite the best of the sunshine across the southeast first thing this morning, the cloud will be building as we head into the afternoon, but still highs of 27, 28 degrees Celsius here where we hold on to some of that heat. The showers continuing to spread their way through during this evening and into the forthcoming night, so there is the chance that most places see a touch of rainfall during that 12-hour period or so. The brisk breeze, though, continues pushing those fresher conditions across all areas of the UK, so tonight will be less muggy and more comfortable for sleeping right across the board. Tomorrow is another day of sunshine and showers. Those showers generally always more frequent up towards the north and the west, perhaps some longer spells of rain for the northern Isles with close to gale strength gusts for a time. Generally, if you're to the east of higher grounds and more broadly across the south, you've got the greater chance of seeing some more prolonged sunshine in there. Still breezy though, but temperatures around 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. Into the rest of next week, it is looking fairly changeable. There will be further showers, potential for thunderstorms at times, but temperatures generally around average for the time of year.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. As you probably know, the breaking news this morning is that the United States has launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure in what President Trump is calling a spectacular military success. Our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has since said Iran can never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and the United States has taken action to alleviate that threat. Let's talk now to the former Director General of Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Yossi Kupawasa. Yossi, welcome to the programme. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Why do you think Donald Trump took this decision? It's not clear to me that it suited his political base. It's not clear to me that he would have planned it without the events that have been created by Israel in the last few days. Why do you think the American president decided to do this?
I think for two reasons. First of all, because he realized that the diplomatic way is not going to yield any fruit. After the Iranian foreign minister refused to accept the ideas that were presented to him by the European foreign ministers in the last attempt to prevent an American attack, it was clear that the diplomatic route is not going to be a successful one. And secondly, he realizes that Iran was very close to having the capability to produce nuclear weapons. And that's it's either you find a solution through diplomatic means which failed, or you take action, and the way Israel decided to do. And once the diplomatic route failed, he joined Israel in doing what needs to be done in order to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons.
I suppose the third reason is that Israel had cleared the skies in Iran. The Iranian Air Force has been pretty much put out of action. Therefore, this operation was going to be much less risky for the United States than it otherwise would have been. So what I'm really saying is Israel created an opportunity for the United States. Israel has been pretty successful in changing the political geography of the Middle East.
We carried a lot of the weight here, and we did the necessary work in order to pave the road for the Americans. But I believe that the Americans would have done it even if we didn't, because there was a need to do that, and we have to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. That's simple as that. And the Iranians don't hide what they're going to do once they have a nuclear weapon. They want to destroy Israel. They want to spread their fanatic understanding of Islam around the globe. And there's a need to make sure that the country that is so dangerous is not going to have the most dangerous weapon.
What is the reaction today in Israel? Prime Minister Netanyahu has not always been very popular. There have been movements against him, demonstrations against him, and so on. But how does the Israeli public react to what has happened overnight with the United States attacking Iran?
I think basically it's beyond politics. This is an existential threat for Israel that Iran will have a nuclear weapon. And once the Americans took this step, this doesn't only mean that the Iranians are not going to be successful in having a nuclear weapon tomorrow, but it also means that the Iranians are not going to be able to produce nuclear weapons in the future, because once you cross this Rubicon of taking military action against the Iranian nuclear project, you're not going to allow it to be revived in the future. So we feel much more safe and secured now that this has been done.
You're speaking with great confidence, Yossi, about the obliteration of the nuclear capability. That's the same tone that Donald Trump has been taking. Do we actually know, have we been able to make an assessment yet of what damage has been caused and what the consequences are of that damage?
No, we don't. But we know how many tons of explosives were falling on the Fordow facility. The Fordow facility is extremely important because this was a facility that was built specifically for enriching uranium for military grade and in a secured place. And the amount of explosives that were used in order to hit it is such that we have to believe that the results were successful. And if President Trump says so, it's another reason to believe it, because he might have some information about it that I don't have. On top of that, we have attacked the entire elements, all the elements that comprise the nuclear project of Iran, with some very few exceptions. And we did it once and again. So there are reasons to believe that the damage done to this project is really immense, including the successful attacks on the conversion facility in Isfahan and on the enrichment facility in Natanz, and on many other facilities that comprise this wide-scale program. And there's a reason to believe that this is not going to be easy for the Iranians to rebuild it. On top of that, they lost many of the major scientists that were leading this effort on the opening day. So it's going to be very difficult for them to revive the project. And if they try, as I said, we've already proven that we can take military moves in order to prevent them from doing so. And the fear of doing that and the idea of deterrence that the Iranians were building on for so long has totally collapsed, because there's no deterrence anymore.
Donald Trump did not say anything about regime change in Iran. But of course, it strikes me that nuclear facilities, you might destroy them and then you might have to come back and destroy them again, and so on and so on and so on. If you had a different sort of regime that was not committed to building nuclear weapons and wasn't financing terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis, if you had a different sort of regime, life would be different for the Middle East, it would be different for Israel. Many of us would feel more secure. So is regime change actually what you would like and what Israel would like?
Of course, we would like to see a regime change in Iran. The problem in Iran is the regime. It's the regime that decided to have a nuclear weapon. It's the regime that decided to build this ring of fire around Israel in order to destroy it. It's the regime that calls every day death to Israel and death to the United States. It's the regime. So we have to deal with the regime. But we didn't put that as a goal because it's beyond our capability to achieve. And this is not our mission. The mission of changing the regime in Iran is the mission of the Iranian people. And it's up to them. If they want to see that happening, of course, we shall be very happy to see them successful in an attempt to change the regime. The fact is that the vast majority of the Iranian people are against the regime. They are suffering under this regime. It suppresses them, tortures them, executes many of them. And it's terrible situations that they are experiencing. And we are now creating a condition in which the regime is going to be much weaker because it's losing its crown jewel, the nuclear weapons program, and it's losing its deterrence that was built on the proxies. Is getting much weaker and now is exposed to American attacks and Israeli attacks. It's every day that goes by, he's becoming weaker and weaker. And is it going to be weak enough in order to convince the people of Iran to step up and try to do something about it? Hard to say. I cannot judge them because nobody can stand in their place. They are very afraid. The regime is not hesitant to take action against them and actually kill them if necessary. And the regime takes all kinds of steps that create a very strange and detached from reality picture for the people of Iran as if they are winning or whatever is going on, because they are not allowed to have the internet access to the internet. So it's I cannot judge what they're doing, but we are, with what we are doing and what the Americans are doing, creating conditions that may encourage them to do things in order to change the regime.
Understood. Thank you very much indeed, Yossi Kupawasa. Coming up, we're going to take a brief pause from the breaking news today. We're going to be discussing the mystery of a shipwreck, because that sort of mystery never fails to capture the imagination. And two high-profile discoveries in recent weeks have sparked conversation. So Richard Jones, a historian, will be here to discuss shipwrecks with me. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Just like we're seeing across the UK, the heat wave that's also been in place in other areas of Europe is now beginning to subside and ease, with temperatures generally dropping back towards closer to average for the time of year. And bar the odd shower, there will be plenty of sunshine across many areas of the Mediterranean. High pressure is looking like it will be staying in charge for a good portion of this forthcoming week, so there'll be plenty of fine weather around.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The seabed guards many secrets of wrecked ships which explorers restlessly try to uncover. As my next guest observes, there's an obvious romance to sunken treasure. Richard Jones has published more than 20 books on shipwrecks. Recently, there's been a rush of new information. Last week, researchers confirmed that they had found the Spanish galleon San Jose, laden with gold and silver and emeralds, they say, off the coast of Colombia. The find has sparked an international row over who will profit from the alleged £16 billion booty. And this week it was announced that a wreck under the sea in Rhode Island is that of Captain Cook's lost ship, HMS Endeavour. Joining me now is the historian Richard Jones. Hello, welcome to GB News.
Thank you very much.
The San Jose, so they found some coins from the San Jose, and those coins have been analysed, and that's led to an academic paper which says that the coins are indeed from the San Jose, therefore that the wreck is there, etc., etc. Now, what does that open up? What is likely to happen next?
The first thing that happens with any shipwreck, especially when treasure's involved, is all of a sudden everybody comes out of the woodwork. First of all, the people who supposedly owned it will come out of the woodwork. Then the people who will claim the treasure is theirs, it's their jurisdiction, it's in their waters. With any wreck, you've got a huge argument. In one such example was HMS Edinburgh that was found in the 1980s. They raised all the gold from there, and a lot of it went to Russia because it was their gold to start off with. And by the time all the court cases and things like that were finished by the guy who actually raised the gold, it was left with just a few £1,000s. So it's incredible how you can go from 20 million to about 30 grand just like that, just because of the amount of controversy over it and the amount of people that want their share.
I mean, mounting an operation to raise the ship or raise treasure from the ship, that is very expensive, technically very complicated, needs a lot of money. So are you saying that the people who invest in researching these wrecks don't have a guarantee of being able to profit from them?
Definitely not. If anything, it's all taken on a huge risk. There's been countless examples of ships that have been found, people have invested, and they've found nothing. They've found some brilliant history, but investors don't want history, they want treasure. They want to be the one to hold those coins in their hand to say, yes, this has been worth it. But like I said in a previous interview not so long ago, for every one person that finds the mother lode, I can give you 1,000 versions of people who've invested everything into searching for wrecks and found nothing at all and lost everything.
We know there's something to find in this case because there are coins, and the coins have been studied. But I don't know what the basis is for claiming that there's gold and silver and emeralds on board. Do you know anything about that? Have you any idea where this figure of £16 billion has come from?
With any shipwreck, the first thing they do is claim just how much amazing treasure's on board. They always turn around and say there's billions, and in some cases there's nothing at all. And if you give out a figure of £16 billion, so to speak, you're going to get people say, well, yeah, I'll invest in that because it looks like a done deal. It looks like a guaranteed return on my investment. But instead, what they're left with is they'll invest with the guy who's found the wreck. They've raised all this history, or even if they don't raise anything at all. And the guy with the diving kit on gets all the credit for finding the wreck, etc. But the investors, they get left behind and they end up with nothing at the end of it to show for all their hard work.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Richard Jones. I'm going to cut you just a tiny bit short there because the Prime Minister has been questioned about the United States' strikes on Iran, and we can have a listen to what the Prime Minister has been saying.
Lots of people watching you speak this morning will be very worried about the news overnight that the US has carried out 3 strikes on Iran. Does the UK support US strikes against Iran?
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear programme and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome. But I'm very clear in my own mind that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is the greatest threat to stability in the region.
Your solution to no nuclear weapon, though, was diplomatic routes, not strikes. The UK has been clear no military action can put an end to Iran's nuclear capabilities, and the language on both sides this morning is worrying. President Trump has said future attacks would be far greater and a lot easier. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran, greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Iran has said the events overnight will have everlasting consequences. Do you agree escalation seems very real, and are you prepared to offer military support, UK military support, if needed?
Well, my focus is on de-escalating the situation. I accept your challenge that there is a risk of escalation. That's a risk to the region, it's a risk beyond the region, and that's why all our focus has been on de-escalating, getting people back around to negotiate what is a very real threat in relation to the nuclear programme. In relation to the UK, we were not involved in the attack. We were given due notice, as we would expect as close allies to the US, and we have been moving assets to the region to make sure that we're in a position to protect our own interests, our personnel and our assets, and of course those of our allies.
Prime Minister, if Iran attacks the US, that would be an attack on a NATO ally. If they attack bases, etc. in the region, it could trigger Article 5. Are you prepared for that, and would the UK become involved?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about what may happen because all of my focus is on de-escalation. But I do want to reassure the public we have taken all necessary measures to protect UK interests, UK personnel, and to work with our allies to protect their interests as well. That's what you would expect. But my focus is on de-escalating this situation, dealing with the threat that is that nuclear programme, but getting the parties around the table to negotiate an outcome to this.
On Tuesday morning, you said how important de-escalation was. This was at the G7. You told me you didn't think a US attack was imminent. You sat next to President Trump at the G7 dinner of leaders. You said nothing the president said suggests he's about to get involved in this conflict. On the contrary, here we are. He has struck Iran. He's done exactly the opposite of what you said you thought he was going to do. Do you feel foolish, frustrated that he's not listening?
Well, it's clearly a fast-moving situation, and there's been a huge amount of discussions in the days since the G7 ended, and the US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear programme poses. My position throughout has been as calling for de-escalation, to get people around the table to negotiate a better outcome diplomatically. And I've been talking to international leaders in recent days, but particularly intensely this morning. We'll continue to do so during the course of today.
And just final question, Prime Minister, what's your message to British citizens? Are you getting them out of the region now?
Well, for British citizens, we've been saying for some time to register their presence. And so far as Israel is concerned, just as soon as we can get charter flights off, we will do so. But I urge all citizens to make contact with the Foreign Office so that we can facilitate whatever support is needed.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That was the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, responding to questions today after the United States launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Sir Keir Starmer has called for de-escalation and has attempted to reassure the British public. Number 10 did say that Iran should not be allowed nuclear weapons, but has encouraged Tehran to return to the negotiating table. Just before, Iran's foreign minister called on the international community to condemn the attacks on Iran, adding that Iran has done nothing wrong. Iran says that they're finding it difficult to understand why they were attacked on what they say is a false claim. Abbas Araghchi said that the extent of the damages are being investigated and that it's been claimed that the US has showed no respect for international law. Foreign Minister said that Iran will respond based on Iran's rights. The Foreign Minister has also just said that Iran has a strategic partnership with Russia, and the Foreign Minister says that he will have consultations on Monday with President Putin. So, my panel is back with me now, Assistant Editor and Parliamentary Sketch Writer at The Spectator, Madeline Grant, former Labour aide Stella Sensikiru, and Policy Fellow at Onward, Andrew Barclay. Stella, what did you make of the Prime Minister's performance, what you saw of it there? Being asked how it was, he was calling for de-escalation up to yesterday, and now having to accept that the United States has gone in and taken decisive action.
He's being extremely cautious because he knows who he's dealing with when it comes to Donald Trump, and obviously he doesn't want to enrage him. And this is all extremely new, and he's following into the footsteps of the rest of our European allies. I would have liked him to take a firmer stance, specifically asking Israel to de-escalate as well, and to make it clear that there isn't enough evidence there to go into a full-on war. But I do not expect him to be making that kind of statement yet.
Andrew Barclay, Prime Minister, being asked there whether he's made a fool of himself by saying that he'd been assured by President Trump that this was not in his mind. Prime Minister's response was, well, that was some days ago, and things happen over a few days. But do you think he's been made to look a bit silly?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think his statement follows on with a certain theme that we've heard from David Lammy recently, which illustrates how irrelevant Britain is becoming, and Europe, actually, on the world stage. That statement was essentially like word-filled air. But actually, we need to be really bold and unequivocal in our support for America and Israel in taking out Iran's nuclear threat, because that is not a distant issue. MI5 have uncovered several plots on British soil recently, and we must be bold in our stance on it.
Maddie, how did you think the Prime Minister was looking at this time when many of the population will be concerned about what's going to happen next?
Well, I think he looked impotent, weak and a bit silly, but it was interesting that he keeps repeating the same platitudinous phrases about de-escalation and bringing people to the table. I mean, what pressure does he think that Sir Keir Starmer could bring to bear on Iran, or indeed, for that matter, the US or Israel? Soft power seems to be the default mode of the government. But I think it's becoming increasingly clear that soft power is no substitute for hard power. We've had an embarrassing diminishment of our armed forces for decades. We've just given away the strategic islands from which these strikes are being launched. And all they can do now, into this kind of void of impotence, is virtue signal. And so that's what we get.
Thank you very much, panel, for your reaction. I think, by the way, the strikes have been launched from Guam, as far as we can tell. Stella Sansigilio, Madeline Grant, Andrew Barclay, thank you very much indeed. We've slightly delayed the noon headlines, but now here they are. I hand over to Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. The United States has joined Israel in its attacks against Iran, dropping bombs on 3 major nuclear sites. President Donald Trump praised the attacks, which, in his words, have obliterated key enrichment facilities. B-2 bombers, which carried the bunker-buster munitions, which were capable of penetrating sites deep underground, are reported to have been used. Iran confirmed the attacks on Natanz, Isfahan and Fordow, but denied it suffered a major blow. The UN Secretary-General has said he's gravely alarmed by the use of force and described the move as a direct threat to international peace and security. In a national address, Donald Trump warned Tehran would face more devastating blows if it does not agree to peace.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has thanked Mr. Trump for what he called a bold decision to use the awesome and righteous might of the US.
History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
Iranian officials have called the attacks outrageous and warned they would have everlasting consequences. The country immediately retaliated with what is reported to be its most significant attacks on Israel since the conflict started. Explosions have been heard in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa, with at least 16 people injured. The UK government is set to evacuate British citizens and their dependents from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories as early as next week. Ministers are urging those who want to leave to register for evacuation as soon as possible. The Israeli government says around 22,000 tourists are seeking to be evacuated, but it's unclear how many of those are UK citizens. The Foreign Office is urging people not to make their way to the airport unless they are contacted ahead of time. In other news, a British man has been arrested in Cyprus accused of spying for Iran and plotting a terror attack near a key RAF base. Local media say the suspect linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard was caught with a long-lens camera and 3 phones watching the UK's key Middle East airbase. He was tracked to a flat near Limassol and arrested. Israel says the plot targeted Israeli citizens and was foiled by a joint operation. The UK Foreign Office says it's in contact with authorities over what some are calling a spy in plain sight. More than 1,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel illegally so far this weekend. 437 arrived on Friday, with more than 500 yesterday. The latest arrivals come despite French authorities taking a tougher stance on their beaches, including using tear gas in some cases. Sir Keir Starmer is warning the situation is deteriorating and has threatened a visa crackdown on countries refusing to take back failed asylum seekers. And the Prime Minister is calling for Glastonbury to remove the Irish hip-hop group Kneecap from its lineup after one of the band members was charged with a terror offence. Liam O'Gahany appeared in court earlier this week after allegedly displaying a flag in support of the proscribed terrorist group Hezbollah during a gig last year. The rapper is currently on bail and due to be in court again in August. He denies the offence. You're up to date. I'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you for the news to Bethany Elsey. Prime Minister has spoken today after the United States has launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Sir Keir Starmer has called for de-escalation and has attempted to reassure the British public. Number 10 did say that Iran should not be allowed nuclear weapons, but has encouraged Tehran to return to the negotiating table. And before that, Iran's foreign minister called on the international community to condemn the attack, adding that Iran has done nothing wrong. Tehran say they find it difficult to understand why they were attacked on what they say is a false claim. And the foreign minister said that Tehran will be in consultations with Vladimir Putin on Monday. Joining me now from Tel Aviv is Colonel Richard Kemp. Hello, Richard. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you.
The reactions that are coming from European countries, some of them sound as though people are trembling in their boots. Some of them sound as if they're using yesterday's script, which was about de-escalation. I wonder whether actually Benjamin Netanyahu is closer to assessing what's happening. He's talked about this being a pivot of history. I mean, if the nuclear capability of Iran has been destroyed, that does put us in a new place, does it not?
A completely new place. And obviously we have to wait and see what the battle damage assessment says about the extent of damage to the nuclear facilities. I'm assuming that with the amount of ordnance that was dropped on them, they probably have been destroyed, although there is also talk of potentially some material having been moved out of Fordo a couple of days before, which might have to be dealt with as well. But yes, it puts the Middle East in a totally different situation. For those of your viewers who aren't aware of it, the action by Israel and the United States is strongly supported by pretty much every Arab country, which feared a nuclear Iran just as much as Israel did. And now we're in a situation, assuming that the nuclear weapons program is gone, not to say it can't be revived at some future time, but it's gone for the time being, where Iran has no strategic options. Nothing Iran can do can change the strategic situation. Yes, it can continue to fire ballistic missiles into Israel, as it did most recently this morning about 7:30. Yes, it can attack US forces and that will receive a significant response if it does. And yes, of course, it can attack energy facilities in Gulf countries and again will receive the response. But none of that is going to be a game changer. So Iran is really, I think, on the ropes with no options left to it.
I accept broadly what you say, as far as I know, by the way, that Arab countries will welcome this. But, of course, Arab countries officially are calling for de-escalation, as are European countries, as is the United Nations. It strikes me that we've rarely been in a more hypocritical situation where so many countries who are, impotent themselves call for de-escalation, whilst maybe quietly rubbing their hands that Iran has overnight ceased to be a nuclear weapons power, or a potential nuclear weapons power.
Yeah, but de-escalation, I look at the Arab countries differently. They have they've got their own agenda they've got to handle internally in their country. So, and what they say publicly is very often quite different to what they really think and to the assistance that they would have given Israel and indeed potentially the US over these raids. But the language of de-escalation and compromise is the only language that's really understood among most Western countries. A negotiated solution that could never have been a negotiated solution on this issue with Iran. There's been many attempts to do so over all the time that Iran's been developing these nuclear systems, and they've always failed. Iran has agreed to this, agreed to that, and then breached it. It's breached the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, etc. Yet every Western country said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and their answer to it is to do nothing, to do absolutely nothing. The only country that was courageous enough, and yes, it's right in the firing line, but courageous enough to stand up and do something about it was Israel, and now backed up by the United States. So I think it tells us a lot about the backbone that exists among most of our political leadership in Europe.
What would you say about the political situation in Israel today? The operation in Gaza has been very controversial, but I assume that the fear of Iran's obtaining a nuclear weapon is a fear that pretty much unites Israelis. Would that be right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Gaza situation was mainly controversial because of the hostages, and of course Israel was split between those who felt Israel should solely focus on getting the hostages back and don't worry too much about Hamas, and then the opposite perspective. So that caused division. In this case, I've been here in Israel since before this particular war between Israel and Iran began, and I've spoken to many people from all different parts of society, different political perspectives, etc. And I've not met one person, not one, who feels that Netanyahu did the wrong thing in carrying out his preemptive attack on Iran. And of course, most people, since it began, have been just hoping that the United States will join in so that the job can be properly finished, assuming that Israel didn't have the capability to finish it itself. And so I think, yeah, there's no question of the unity here now in Israel. I think it's not necessarily a very unified country at the best of times, but I think it's unprecedented.
Yes, and a small number of Israelis has been killed, a larger number have been wounded, but there is, in your judgment, resilience in the population.
Undoubtedly. I hate to say that the impact has been minimum because, of course, 25, as far as I'm aware, 25 Israelis have been killed and a larger number wounded, and a lot of buildings have been destroyed. But when you consider that Iran fired something like 500 ballistic missiles in the last week and something like, I think, 1,000 drones, that level of impact is minimal. And one of the main reasons that I think a huge strategic asset of Israel is the shelter system and the warning system. And by and large, you get about half an hour's warning of a ballistic missile attack, not always, which allows people to go into their shelters. And I think only 3 people have been killed in the shelters. So it's, each one of those, of course, is tragic. But the Iranian offensive has had minimal effect. And although places like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are very quiet at the moment because people are staying fairly close to their homes and their shelters, I think this could go on if it was necessary for several weeks longer.
Thank you very much. Colonel Richard Kent speaking to us this afternoon from Tel Aviv. And my panel rejoins me now, Assistant Editor and Parliamentary Sketch Writer at The Spectator, Madeline Grant, former Labour aide Stella Sensikidu, and Policy Fellow at Onward, Andrew Barclay. Andrew, I was talking about the hypocrisy of responses around the world, talking about the hypocrisy of responses in the Arab world, hypocrisy, I think, of the European responses as well, calling for de-escalation, and yet probably waking up this morning feeling rather relieved that Iran's nuclear weapon threat has been removed. How should we, citizens of these rather unbrave countries, feel about all this?
Well, I think it doesn't. The Labour government haven't given us cause to feel particularly inspired by making the same statement for the past 3 weeks of de-escalation, both before an attack and after an attack. So it very much feels like it's pre-scripted and very waffly and wet. I think.
Yeah, I refer to it as yesterday's script. I mean, half of what the Prime Minister said is like he hadn't noticed what's happened, like someone gave him the wrong bit of paper. This is what I was saying yesterday. I mean, the world has changed.
Precisely, and I think it speaks to a Prime Minister who actually, not just on this issue, but across so many issues, doesn't know what he actually believes. We have to be bold on this, not only bold in our statements of supporting America and Israel, but actually go a step further and do stuff that's long overdue, like prescribing the IRGC as a terrorist organisation, because as we've just seen in Cyprus on the RAF base, they plot terror on British soil. So the waffly and wet pre-scripted statements won't cut it.
Stella, I know you're up in arms about what has happened overnight, but on this point about, you know, a government speaking out one side of its mouth and kind of having feelings that are quite different, there's another thing that undermines faith in government, isn't it?
That is exactly what I'm thinking, Michael.
Yes.
And I'm thinking specifically of the hypocrisy of people who are saying that their top priority is that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons, and yet they opposed Obama's deal with Iran, which was going to do exactly that. If Donald Trump was so passionate about stopping the Iranian regime from nuclear weapons, why did he not support the Obama deal, which was going to do exactly that? Why did Netanyahu not try to support that?
Could it be that they didn't trust Iran?
That they didn't trust Iran. OK, great. So a country like Iran, we do not agree with their government, but it is unlikely to be toppled and to be replaced with a government that is going to be at all friendlier to the West or to Israel, given the current political circumstances. What are the options that we are giving, one, to Iranian people and two, to the Iranian government, when they are looking at countries like Ukraine, for example, or Syria, and what happened to them when they dropped their plans for nuclear weapons? And what happened to North Korea? What did we do with North Korea? We let them be in peace. So this is the example that they're going to be following. There is no...
I'm sure that's quite a good point. Just back to your Obama point and your trusting of Iran, why do you think they've got this facility deep inside a mountain producing highly enriched uranium? Why do you think it's deep inside a mountain? Why do you think they're enriching it to such an extent? You think these people should be trusted?
I think it is entirely logical that they would be trying to develop a nuclear weapon. But the thing is that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has said that they are very far away from actually having an atomic bomb. The same was said by the CIA, that is, the US intelligence service said that they are very far away from doing that. And once again, we have exactly the same situation we had with Iraq, which is it's happening all the time in our entanglement with the Middle East. We exaggerate specific threats, and we have politicians like Netanyahu, whose entire political career is based on his warmongering, using it as a political capital.
Madeleine, one of my theses about modern politics is that one event after another leads to loss of confidence in the British state, and that only benefits Reform UK. I just wonder whether this also falls into that category. I mean, as we see the impotence of Britain, the powerlessness of Sir Keir Starmer, the mouthing of the platitudes, while history moves in a direction completely beyond his control, is this just another thing that undermines confidence in the British state?
Well, I think it's a difficult question, because I think many British citizens will be looking at this and they will be feeling a kind of a general fear, but without perhaps, I don't know if we follow international affairs that closely, that this would be a kind of totemic issue that would really focus minds. But I think that general feeling of decay, the fact that we're not safe, that we're perhaps led by people who haven't put our national interest at heart. And obviously, this comes just a couple of days after something I really think people should be talking about more. The fact that a pair of Palestinian protesters were able to break into RAF Brize Norton, which is supposedly a heavily guarded RAF facility. These kind of national humiliations, the kind of thing that if they had happened decades ago, there might have been an inquiry into it and heads would roll. But this is the kind of low-level decay that we accept. I think absolutely that feeds into Reform UK.
I mean, I think the Brize Norton thing is remarkable because, you know, we've had at least 2 years of Palestinian demonstrations in London. We've had 3 years of Russia being at war with Ukraine. I mean, if we're not on a high state of alert at the moment,
I know.
what on earth would induce us to be so?
I know, and we need to be particularly concerned about what happens in the next few weeks, because I think that, you know, if Iran has lost its nuclear bomb capabilities, perhaps, if that is the case, then, you know, this makes it more likely, I think, that they will then focus their energies into perhaps lower level, I mean, not that it would be low level to the people experiencing it, but terror attacks, and potentially more likely to be against Europe because of the level of infiltration than in America, even though America is the one that has been promoting these attacks. So I think, you know, that there's a very high short-term risk of terror attacks on European soil. Are we prepared for it? I suspect probably not.
Cheerful note going on, but thank you very much indeed, panel. Thank you for your flexibility, because obviously things have been moving quite fast this morning. Madeline Grant, Stella Sensitivo and Andrew Barclay. Coming up, more reaction to the breaking news. This is Sunday with Mike Portillo, only on GB News. Thank you.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the...
Unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to...
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
French authorities first seized the Lady T, and that's an Eastbourne-based fishing vessel. And next, they find its skipper, Philip Edwards, €30,000 to release his boat. Now, the Lady T, operating legally under UK jurisdiction, was intercepted by a French patrol ship near the Somme Bay. Now, the incident has sparked massive outrage among British fishermen and is renewing calls for the government to stand firm against French overreach in national waters. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joining with Charlotte Edwards, who's the husband. Husband Philip is the skipper of the Lady T and is out fishing right now. Charlotte, welcome to the show. I've got to say, here at GB News, we are hugely supportive and appreciative of British fishermen and fisherwomen. Do a fantastic job. So if you're nervous about the interview, please don't be. I want to ask you how on earth this happened. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, for example, that the Lady T didn't have the correct paperwork, it was fishing illegally, and the French decided to pounce. What's the reality?
The paperwork just slipped through. It was an admin error. The other 2 boats had the permits, and unfortunately, his didn't at the time. He wasn't in as far in as they said he was. He was about 800 metres in their water. He wasn't near the 12-mile.
He was intercepted by the Pluvier. That's a French Navy ship. No, by the way, the sort of French Navy ships that just seem to give an escort to illegal dinghies coming into British waters, suddenly pouncing into action. The only boat they've managed to stop seems to be the Lady T.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo, which has been a different programme today. for the obvious reason that we have this breaking news. I think most of you will know by now the United States has launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure in what President Trump has called a spectacular military success. In response, Iran has said that Tehran reserves the right to defend its national security, interests and people. This comes as our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is set to chair a COBRA meeting, one of those security meetings, later this afternoon. And here's what the Prime Minister had to say just a short while ago.
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear programme and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome. But I'm very clear in my own mind that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is the greatest threat to stability in the region.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking a short while ago. British Iranian activist Vahid Beheshti joins us now. Vahid, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a great pleasure to have your expertise. Prime Minister saying there that people should now get around the table. If Iran has ceased to have the threat of a nuclear weapon overnight, what is there to get around the table about?
I think this is repeating the same mistake that our leaders, our policy makers, which they do not want to understand, some of them. And after 46 years, constant failure in confronting this brutal regime, which is not driven by politics, but by a crazy ideology, which they believe they have a divine mission from the God, from the sky, and the divine mission is that destroying Western civilization, replace it by caliphate, by Islamic state. But after 46 year failure, our leaders, our policymakers still think in their own mind they can change the behavior of this regime. How can you change the behavior of a Scorpio? Doesn't matter what service you provide to the Scorpion, it's going to bite you, because the nature of a Scorpion is a Scorpion. You cannot change it. But now our Prime Minister talking about stabilizing the region, de-escalating. The only way to de-escalate and stabilize the region, and not just the region here in our soil, because two of our Home Secretary, the previous one, Suela Braverman, and the current one, they said IRGC is the great threat to our national security. It's not just about there. It's about here. It is about this stream of radicalism, which brainwashing our youth, radicalize them and turn them into the enemy of our values. British values are democratic and human values. So not just for there, for here, our Prime Minister should understand this time they have to change their way. So they cannot sit around one table with this regime and talk to them. The only way to de-escalate the threat of this regime, nuclear or terrorist threat of the regime, is to destroy this regime, is regime change. And we are on that path. Thank God, after 46 years, the regime change is not going to happen only by international community, and is not going to happen only by the effort of Iranian people. It's a joint task between Iranian people and international community. And after 46 years, we come to this. I'll finish that. We come to that point that the world understand, Israel especially, due to the existential threat toward them from this regime. Understand they have to remove this regime, and the Iranian people are there waiting. In next 10 days we will see, in 2 weeks they're waiting for more strike. They got to come back to the streets and finish the job. That's the only way to neutralize them. Yes.
So Vahid, Iranians at the moment are being killed by airstrikes. Many Iranians are having to evacuate their properties. They're having to move away from Tehran. Some of them may feel extreme resentment against Israel because of that. On the other hand, many Iranians resist the regime under which they've lived for 46 years. Many of them would like to see that regime change. So what do you think is the, as it were, net effect of all this on the mood in Iran?
Look, I am very famous for one of the figures which constantly it's in contact with Iran. With different communities, ethnic, religious, and political. We are preparing our group in different cities for the final uprising. But you have to look at the statistic. We don't have an accurate statistic but I can say with full confidence, more than 80% of Iranians stand still with Israel. A year and a half ago, I am the only figure who gave a speech in Israeli parliament, Knesset. Year and a half, a few weeks after October the 7th, I addressed the ministers in Knesset, and I asked for these strikes. I asked for this strike on the nuclear side, IRGC sides, and the House of High Officials. 2 weeks later, the Iranian people hung big banners, 6 meters banner from Iran. I'm talking about a year and a half ago. 6 meters banner from Iran in Tehran. They said, Vahid Beheshti is our voice. We stand by Israel. 2 weeks later, they hung another banner. They said, Vahid Beheshti brought our message to Israel. Bibi, we are ready. This was the big banner in middle of Tehran. So the Iranian people are waiting for more strike and are standing on the side of Israel. So let's look at the situation at the moment, what we are facing. We are facing with this, I would say, full-scale hybrid intelligence military warfare against Iranian regime. But on this front, on one side we have Iranian people. At this time now, we have America joined and Israel. On the other side, we have Iranian regime. So the people who have been killed are the murderers. This is very important for the viewers. The people have been killed and have been targeted by Israel military IDF. They are the murderers of the children of Iranian people. They are Iranian people. They were happy. They are dancing. They're holding the picture of Benjamin Netanyahu and sing for him. So this is very important to understand.
Vahid Beheshti, very clear. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on GB News. There's lots more still to come. First of all, we're going to have the latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom at 12:30. The United States has joined Israel in its attacks against Iran, dropping bombs on 3 major nuclear sites, and warned there's more to come if Iran does not agree to peace. President Donald Trump praised the attacks, which in his words have obliterated key enrichment facilities. B-2 bombers, which carried the bunker buster munitions, which are capable of penetrating sites deep underground, are reported to have been used. Iran confirmed the attacks on Natanz, Isfahan and Fordow, but denied it has suffered a major blow. The UN Secretary-General has said he's gravely alarmed by the use of force and described the move as a direct threat to international peace and security. Well, Iranian officials have called the attacks outrageous and warned they would have everlasting consequences. The country immediately retaliated with what is reported to be the most significant attacks on Israel since the conflict started. Explosions have been heard in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Haifa, with at least 16 people injured. And in the last hour, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has recognised the risk of escalation not only in the Middle East, but beyond, and is urging Iran to negotiate with the US.
It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome. But I'm very clear in my own mind that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is the greatest threat to stability in the region.
This is obviously a fast-paced moving story, and we'll keep you up to date here on GB News.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, this is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. We may now officially be into astronomical summer, but it is turning fresher for many of us as we see some heavy showers push in on a brisk breeze, all associated with this area of low pressure. Tightly spaced isobars means those winds are going to be quite blustery around today, and those weather fronts are starting to push in those showers from the west. They have the potential to be quite heavy at times with some rumbles of thunder, particularly across northern and western areas of the UK. And if you are in that breeze, you'll certainly notice the fresher, almost cooler feel to things compared to the recent heat wave. Across northern areas of Scotland, we'll be around the mid-teens in terms of our Celsius mark, more around 20 degrees across the far east where we see a touch of shelter. Again, for parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England, around the high teens here as those showers continue to push their way through. There will be some sunshine in between, but despite the best of the sunshine across the southeast first thing this morning, the cloud will be building as we head into the afternoon, but still highs of 27, 28 degrees Celsius here where we hold on to some of that heat. The showers continuing to spread their way through during this evening and into the forthcoming night, so there is the chance that most places see a touch of rainfall during that 12-hour period or so. The brisk breeze, though, continues pushing those fresher conditions across all areas of the UK, so tonight will be less muggy and more comfortable for sleeping right across the board. Tomorrow is another day of sunshine and showers. Those showers generally always more frequent up towards the north and the west, perhaps some longer spells of rain for the Northern Isles with close to gale strength gusts for a time. Generally, if you're to the east of higher grounds and more broadly across the south, you've got the greater chance of seeing some more prolonged sunshine in there. Still breezy though, but temperatures around 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. Into the rest of next week, it is looking fairly changeable. There will be further showers, potential for thunderstorms at times, but temperatures generally around average for the time of year.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo and to our breaking news. The United States has launched a series of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure in what President Trump has called a spectacular military success. In response, Iran has said that Tehran reserves the right to defend its national security interests and people. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is set to chair a COBRA meeting later this afternoon. I'm very pleased to say that we have in the studio now the Republican commentator Norlie Notstrom. Norlie, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
A president who was elected for the second time, pledged not to get involved in foreign wars, has overnight attacked Iran. How did he change his mind? Why did he change his mind?
Martin, I think that's a great question. And firstly, you noted he was voted in power for the platform of no new wars, peace, which I think he was doing a brilliant job of.
So you're unhappy today?
I woke up this morning feeling less safe as an American, feeling the world is less safe, and feeling that our leader, Donald Trump, who's supposed to reflect the will of the people, has betrayed the will of the people and is reflecting the will of Benjamin Netanyahu, who, as we know, was under a lot of pressure within his own country. One, he was on trial for corruption. Two, former leaders of the IDF were calling for the stop of this war in Gaza, for the release of the hostages, to stop the starvation of 2.4 million people, of which half of them are children. And he was at risk, and suddenly that whole week he was under fire within his own country. He decides to attack Iran, which did not have nuclear weapons, according to all the intelligence. And I feel it was a gross miscalculation on Trump's part.
But normally, Iran was developing a nuclear weapon. It had this enormous facility buried deep in a mountain and was enriching uranium to very high degrees. Are you doubting that its objective was to obtain a nuclear weapon? The objective of the United States and of Britain and of many other countries was that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. Bingo, today that is the situation we're in. That American policy has been achieved overnight.
Martin, I would disagree with you.
Michael, actually, but never mind.
Sorry, apologies.
Right.
Michael, I haven't had my coffee today. I would say that the intelligence in America, the IAEA, said they did not have nuclear weapons. I think what was at issue here was the enrichment of uranium, but they do not have nuclear weapons. They even have a fatwa against nuclear weapons. We were not at imminent threat. I think it was a gross miscalculation. It was in the interest, the political interest of Bibi Netanyahu to move the focus to Iran. As Americans, we voted for America first. We voted for our national interest, our securities, no new war. This is 2003 all over again. And the downside for the world, for my Israeli friends, for my friends in the Middle East, for Americans, for the entire world is far greater than any upside.
Even if one can explain how politically this suits Bibi Netanyahu, there can't be much doubt about that. I think most Israelis are rather pleased this morning that the Iranian nuclear threat has been ended. Even if you can prove that, what is the connection to Donald Trump? Why would Donald Trump want to help Bibi Netanyahu? Actually, I don't think their relations have always been that close, have they?
No, they haven't been that close. And as I said, I think it was a gross miscalculation on his part. I think he was massively under pressure because Bibi Netanyahu started this. I think without America by its side, they didn't have the capabilities to finish it, and he was put in a corner. And unfortunately, the swamp that he was voted in to drain, I believe, has now swallowed him up.
Explain that metaphor. The swamp is what? It's the establishment in Washington.
It's the deep state. It's the outdated mentality that is pro-war for solving the problems of the world. I think Donald Trump was doing a fantastic job of using peace to solve the problems. We saw it with India and Pakistan. And in fact, with the DRC and Rwanda, he was trying to bring peace to the Middle East. He was trying to do it with Russia and the Ukraine. And a lot of people in the rest of the world actually are pro-war and don't agree with his values.
President Trump could have predicted that people like you, of whom there are many within his own party, would say things like you're saying today. So explain to me why he's taken that enormous political risk.
Perhaps he naively believes we're safer and that this is done and dusted. And I think that's a very naive estimation because Iran is part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I would note that Israel is not part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And for several decades...
Do you feel threatened by an Israeli bomb?
I look at the way they're conducting the war in Gaza. I feel threatened by their lack of humanity for innocent civilians. Yes, I think that sets a dangerous moral standard. And I believe America, as the leader of the free world, we must look at our values and stand strong to our values because we are setting an example. And this is a dangerous example. When we attack non-provoked, there is no self-defense going on here.
If it ends with what happened last night, if these strikes have been so effective that the United States doesn't need to return to the battle, will you in due course forgive Donald Trump?
As I said, I voted for him for peace, for putting America's interests first, for solving our fiscal problems at home, our border problems at home. I feel less safe because we have over 10 million illegal immigrants in the U.S., and this will seed anti-American views. I will be concerned about increased terrorism as a result of this, cyber attacks as a result of this.
Are you saying you won't forgive him?
It is possible to forgive. I do believe in forgiveness, but I think it's a gross miscalculation on his part, and his base was overwhelmingly against him getting involved in Iran.
Very interesting. Thank you very much to the commentator Nora Lee Noxton, telling us really the risk that Donald Trump has taken with his own political base. Coming up, we'll be taking a short break from the breaking news story. I'll be speaking with the great-grandson of Frank Griffiths, whose extraordinary escape from the Nazis during the Second World War inspired his great-grandson to retrace his footsteps along the route to escape. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Just like we're seeing across the UK, the heat wave that's also been in place in other areas of Europe is now beginning to subside and ease, those temperatures generally dropping back towards closer to average for the time of year. And bar the odd shower, there will be plenty of sunshine across many areas of the Mediterranean. High pressure is looking like it will be staying in charge for a good portion of this forthcoming week, so there'll be plenty of fine weather around.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You have to tackle gross levels of inequality. Now, this is not about being... it's not about fairness or the politics of envy. It's about saying we need more money in average people's pockets so they can go out and spend. What's happening is a lot of people are spending all their money on rent and mortgages.
People and give it to poorer people.
Yeah, but obviously, when I say rich, who do you imagine?
No, well, I don't know, because I'm not proposing it. You tell me.
So for me, I'm not talking about those who've done quite well, those who've grown their businesses. I'm talking about the billionaire class and the corporations. Oh. And I don't want to look at increasing income taxes necessarily. It should be about a wealth tax, because if we don't do anything about it, it's going to get worse. Now, what's interesting what you said about benefits, I know there's this pervasive idea. I just want to make that point quickly.
Let him finish his point. She's about to spontaneously combust, but hang on. Go on, finish your point.
There is this pervasive idea that, well, we need to cut benefits to force people into work. And you can understand the logic there. It makes sense, right? What's interesting is in Denmark, they have a higher labour rate of participation, which a fancy phrase of more working age people are in work than the UK. In 2022, it was like 80%, 2024, 75%. Look at the UK, only 53% of people in work, yet Denmark have a far higher or far generous welfare state.
Well, we've had a lot of cheap labour that has come in, which that's taken the levels of earnings down at times, and that's left...
I disagree with that.
Well, just let me finish. And that's left a lot of people who already live here, basically lounging on the sofa and thinking, well, my benefits are great, why should I get out of bed? Why should I get out of bed for another 20 quid a week? And we've got to get rid of that mentality, because it's the same people...
You're using anecdotes here. You're not looking at the facts.
I've told you the facts. Who seem to be contributing to this economy year in and year out, and a lot of them are actually older.
GB News, the People's Channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. On the 14th of August 1943, squadron leader Frank Griffiths set out on a secret mission to deliver supplies to members of the French resistance in occupied France. His plane crashed at a village near Annecy, killing all 6 of his crew and 5 civilians. Only Frank survived What happened next was extraordinary. Frank embarked on an epic 1,400-mile, 108-day escape from the Nazis, eventually reaching safety in Gibraltar, following an arduous trek through the Pyrenees and Spain. And 79 years on, his great-grandson, Adam Hart, decided to retrace the journey and to produce this book, Operation Pimento. And Adam is with me now. Your great-grandfather was the most extraordinary man. Even before this extraordinary adventure, he'd had a couple of scrapes with death, hadn't he?
He had, yeah. So he joined the RAF just before the war. His first role in the RAF for the first few years of the war was as a test pilot. So he was testing all sorts of experimental equipment and aircraft coming off the production line. And he had various terrifying scrapes that he somehow managed to get out of. So just a few off the top of my head, there was one time he was testing some navigational thing in a hurricane and went into a dive to test whatever it was and found that his throttle had jammed. And he then proceeded to dive 10,000 feet, trying desperately to get this throttle stick out. And he took off his harness at the wrong point, and anyway, the plane started to go like this, and he was pinned against the roof. Anyway, somehow he managed to come out of it. Or another story of testing a depth charges in a seaplane called a Walrus. And he was testing it with a submarine, and he'd landed, at the end of the trials, landed by the submarine, gone down for lunch on the submarine with the commander, had a nice boozy lunch, enjoyed himself, came back up onto the submarine deck and found that the sea had become, swell had picked up. And so rather than being towed back to the shore, because he couldn't take off in his seaplane in a rough sea, rather than be towed back, he asked the commander to just steam his submarine straight into the wind. And he'd chase behind in his Walrus in the slick and get airborne before hitting the submarine, hopefully. So he was quite a maverick, yeah, and he used to fly underneath the Menai Bridge near Anglesey. He's a maverick character. And,
OK.
Yeah.
So the main adventure that you write about here is the plane crashes. He's the only survivor. He's injured. How does he survive at all? He's picked up by the French resistance, is he?
He is, yeah. So it's a complete miracle he survives. As you said, his 6 crew were all killed and 5 civilians. Crashes into buildings near Annecy. His 6 crew, by the way, had an average age of 23.
Oh, yes.
So 2 years younger than I am now, which is
Yes.
pretty staggering. But anyway, Frank survives because this is a complete miracle. As the aircraft hit the buildings and began to break up, he was actually catapulted through his cockpit, still attached to his seat, still in his harness with his seat. And he's soaring across the night sky. He was knocked out on impact. And he collides with these telephone wires, normal sort of telephone wires, which break his fall and save his life. He doesn't smash into a building or the ground and presumably be killed. And he remembers that he regained consciousness hanging in these wires and just felt himself, flailing in a panic and released his harness. And he remembers falling, hitting the ground, knocked himself out again, and broke his shoulder. Anyway, came to again and then staggers away from this awful burning wreck of his aircraft. And that's when he's picked up by the French resistance.
It's an extraordinary story, and you don't want to give all of it away because you want people to buy the book. We know how it ends. He manages to get to Gibraltar. And you decided that you were going to retrace his steps. An extraordinary decision. Why did you take it, and how did it turn out?
Well, I took the decision because I'd always wanted to know more about Frank. I've always known of his story. It's a family legend. But I thought, you always wanted to find out more and find out details that he would have forgotten and just find out the fuller picture. So I was at university and I won a travel journalism bursary to go and retrace this escape. And it was absolutely the most wonderful journey. I retraced him from Annecy all the way down to Gibraltar. And along the way, I met these descendants of French civilians who'd saved him in 1943.
Oh, gosh, that's fantastic.
And it was amazing. Just the most remarkable meetings. These people were so attached to the story and so proud of what their ancestors had done. They even cried. One person even cried when she saw me. Another family told me it was still their greatest honour to have helped an RAF pilot in the war. And it was just these incredibly emotional meetings. And I tried to write about them in the book. So I tell Frank's escape story alongside of my retracing in the book. But it was just these most amazing meetings. And I think that's what actually inspired me to write it when I got back.
Was it tough going through the Pyrenees?
It was tough going through the Pyrenees, yeah. So this was part of his escape. Frank hikes over the Pyrenees to Spain. And I retraced the hike. And he did it in 3 nights, about 80 miles. And I was 22. I'd just done an Ironman triathlon. I thought, oh, this will be easy. And I can keep up with him. And anyway, I did it in 4 days. I couldn't keep up with his pace.
Congratulations. So the book is called Operation Pimento, My Great-Grandfather's Great Escape, and it's by Adam Hart. Adam Hart, I thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me about it. And I'd like to thank all my guests today. It's been a lively day because we've been bringing you the breaking news. The Pentagon is due to hold a news conference shortly on the developing situation. Coverage will continue all day here on GB News. And up next will be Dawn Neeson. This programme will be back next week. I won't be back until the 13th of July. Dawn, what's going to be on your programme today?
Much, Michael. Yeah, we have got a packed programme for you. We are indeed going live to the Pentagon to hear what the Secretary of Defence, Pete Hesketh, has to say on the situation. And we will, of course, be bringing you every single developing moment as it happens through the afternoon. We're going to Israel. We're talking to experts here. We're talking to experts in America. You don't want to miss what's coming up. We're keeping you on top of every single piece of information you need. All of that coming up after this very quick break. We'll see you soon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Sunshine and showers is the name of the game over the next few days, all because an area of low pressure is sat just to the north of the UK. Some tightly spaced isobars mean there's quite a brisk breeze around, and it's these weather fronts that are really driving in those showers. They have the potential to be heavy at times, also thundery in places as well. They're moving in on that brisk breeze, which is also heralding in some fresher conditions. And so we're losing the humidity that we've had around recently. So tonight should be much more comfortable for sleeping for everyone. Temperatures generally around 10 to 16 degrees Celsius. A few of those showers will just be lingering across the far southeast first thing tomorrow morning, but they will eventually clear their way off. And generally for the southern half of England into Wales, tomorrow starts on a nice fine note, lots of bright sunny conditions around. We will always have those showers though across parts of the north and the west. To begin with, some of those could still be on the heavy side with some longer spells of rain for Caithness, Sutherland and the Northern Isles also. Stronger winds here as well, perhaps close to gale strength for a time. The showers will continue in the north and west, but generally turn a little lighter as we head throughout the day. But if you're to the east of higher ground, so parts of County Antrim, County Down, but also eastern Scotland, eastern England, and more broadly across the southern half of the UK, it should be a relatively fine day overall with some decent sunny spells in there. It's still going to be blustery though, and you will notice that wind if you are outside, making it feel on the slightly cooler theme of things, generally temperatures between 15 and 24 degrees Celsius. Into Monday evening, the cloud will start to build from the west, perhaps some longer spells of rain arriving for Northern Ireland later on in the day. This heralds in another very changeable theme as we head throughout the rest of the week. So further showers, longer spells of rain are still possible, at times even more thunderstorms in places. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses for another chance to win Text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dordme, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 22nd of June. Thank you very much for your company. This is the weekend on GB News. Now,
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody...
Donald Trump says Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities have been obliterated after US stealth jets launched a daring bombing raid overnight, bringing America directly into Israel's war against Iran. And Sir Keir Starmer appears to support the strikes, saying Iran can never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. As tensions skyrocket, will the UK be dragged into a new Middle East conflict?
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear programme and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat.
And meanwhile, protesters marched through central London with placards in support of Iran's supreme leader during a heated pro-Palestinian demonstration yesterday. After Trump strikes, could we see more disorder on the streets of the UK? Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel says this can't be tolerated.
It is right that the agencies look at everyone that are involved in these, not just protests, but those that are carrying the Iranian placards, you know, the propaganda, basically, defending the actions of Iran.
And the US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, will hold a news conference any minute now to give updates on President Trump's decision to strike Iranian nuclear sites. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend. So thank you very much for your company this Sunday at lunchtime. I really appreciate it. Now, many of you will be waking up and concerned this morning about what's going on, and it is indeed a huge story. But rest assured, we will be bringing you updates throughout the show when